Hey y'all, I'm Lauren and welcome to Cantina Cast. Today I'm talking about the upcoming novel Inquisitor Rise of the Red Blade, written by Delilah S Dawson. This novel will be released on July 18th, but today I'm giving y'all a little bit of a sneak peek about what you can expect if this is something that you're considering if you want to pick up or not. Inquisitors are agents of the Empire that were former Jedi that, after Order 66, eventually began to work for the Empire, and they're pretty much Jedi hunters is what they are. And if you've watched the TV show Rebels, then, or if you've also even watched the Obi-Wan Kenobi Disney Plus show, you're familiar with what Inquisitors are for the most part. And what this story does is it's going further in depth into the story of Iskat Akaris, who is an Inquisitor that we've actually seen her character in the Vader comic before, but only for a very short amount of time. For the most part, this is a very new character. And so in this story, we're finding out what led her down that path to become an Inquisitor. Why is it that after Order 66, she hates the Jedi so much that she's willing to hunt them down in service of the Emperor? That's pretty much the main issue that this book is getting into, is what is it about the Jedi Order that could have made a few, a handful of Jedi take it this far? Why is it that they wanted to do this? And Iskat's story is just one example of a few Inquisitors that we can kind of look into with more detail and get a sense of what may have happened there. Now, I will say that when I went into this book, when I started reading it, I didn't know a whole lot about it. I hadn't read the synopsis first. What I knew about it going into it was I knew what Inquisitors are, and I had seen the cover art of the book, and I knew the title of the book. That was pretty much all I knew. And I feel like going into this book with only that information, it really enhanced the story for me, because as I was reading it, I felt like it was more of like a process of discovery. Like I was just really able to just get lost in a new Star Wars story with a character that I hadn't really interacted with a ton, and it just felt like very refreshing in that way. Especially if you've been following a lot of High Republic stuff like I have. It was really, really nice to just get a totally fresh, totally new story, which we kind of know, like based on context clues, like in what direction it's going to be going in. But for the most part, in regards to like the specifics of this particular character and what exactly sends her down the path that she goes down, I knew nothing about it, and I just loved just like getting into, like I said a second ago, like getting into that process of discovery and just kind of like seeing what happens with no preconceived notions of how exactly it was going to go down. So if you are the type of person where, like, if you're like me, where sometimes you might like to go into a story not knowing a whole lot about it, this is a rare chance that you can do this with the Star Wars story. Like, we know a little bit going into it. I mean, that's inevitable if you're a Star Wars fan, but it's one of the rare cases where I didn't already know like a lot about the character beforehand, or a lot about the where exactly the storyline was going to go. I just felt like it was like a totally new experience, and that's a big part of the reason I really, really got into this book and I really enjoyed it. So that's just something to think about. But for those of y'all that maybe if you do want some more details before deciding if you want to try this book out or not, I'll give y'all a little bit more details. Of course, this is a pre-release video, so I'm not going to be giving any spoilers in this video. This is just pretty much getting into like the general kind of ideas that we're seeing. So when this book opens, we are seeing the beginning of the Clone War. Iskat Akaris is a Jedi Padawan at this point, and she's really just having a hard time fitting into the Jedi Order. And a harder time than like pretty much any character that I personally have spent a lot of time with. Like, she wants to do the right thing, but she's not clicking with anybody else in the order. She feels very lost. She feels very lonely for this reason, because she kind of feels like she can't really just have a real conversation with anybody about what exactly she's dealing with, and like what's like a real way to actually improve. With the Clone War, once that starts and once that's ramping up, it just gets harder for her. And because of that, for various reasons, some reasons completely out of the Jedi's control and just based purely on the circumstances of war, and some of it based on some poor decision making on certain Jedi's parts. Because of that, Iscott kind of ends up getting left behind. And she's just really struggling to try to make it work, but without any of the guidance or resources that most Jedi Padawans would need. And so that's where we're starting off. And so you can see how starting from that place and then trying to catch up with her studies during a war that's putting a lot of pressure on the Jedi, along with the fact that Jedi are people. So there's great Jedi that are really trying to do the right thing and are really putting forth effort. And there's also Jedi that, kind of they're not great. And she's trying to navigate that situation. Throughout the course of the book, we see how all of these different elements play into her life and play into her developing attitude towards the Jedi as the story goes on. And of course, you can tell from the cover of the book and the title of the book. And if you read the Vader comic, you already know where she ends up for the most part. She ends up eventually becoming an Inquisitor. And so this story is really following that progression of how exactly does she get to be dissatisfied? How exactly does she fall to the dark side? What leads her down that path? I really loved how this story goes super deep into the small details of her character and the way that it kind of shows this sort of fall to the dark side unfolding over time. It's not like a sudden thing, and it's not like something where there's just one answer for why this happened. So I felt like this was just really well handled by the author. So if you couldn't tell already, I definitely think that this is a great book to read. This is also a great book to read if you're new to Star Wars novels and you're looking for a place to jump in. This is a good place to jump in because you don't need to know a whole bunch of context going into it. Even if you haven't even seen Rebels, if you don't even know what an Inquisitor is, this story, it helps you understand that concept. You're just kind of learning about it for the first time, but this story does get you there with all that knowledge that you need. And of course, once it's actually out, then I'll release my longer video where I go through the plot details and I give more thoughts about it as I was reading it. And I'm just really looking forward to talking about this one because I really like how Delilah S Dawson is handling this particular issue in the Star Wars universe. And I really like the perspectives that we're seeing, kind of like the different sides. So I think at this point, it probably goes without saying that this book, it is one of the highlights of my Star Wars reading of the year so far. Not only is it a compelling story, but the way that it's exploring these characters and kind of why people make the decisions that they make, what's going on with the Jedi at this time, how are the Jedi falling, what are the circumstances that created that. It's getting into all that in a deep way. And the perspective that we see it from, of Iscott's perspective, is I found it very compelling and I really can't say enough good things about it. I probably better stop talking before I accidentally say a spoiler. That's how into this book I was. So yeah, if you're interested in prequel era, if you're interested in Inquisitors, if you're interested in the fall of the Jedi Order, if any of those concepts are something that you like reading about, that you want to kind of get more into a story about, then I really feel like this book is going to be for you. And I will be back with my full review of this book once it comes out on July 18th. And I'll get a lot more into what exactly I loved about it and what really worked for me. But let me know in the comments if you're thinking about reading this one. And thanks so much for watching, guys. And I hope that y'all have a great rest of your day. Bye, y'all.